Så där. Varmt välkomna tillbaka allesammans till Statistikfrämjandets höstkonferens 2023 där vi nu pratar om etik och teknik. Nu är det dags att få lyssna till Josefin Rosén som ursprungligen är farmacidoktor från Uppsala universitet, men hon har över 20 års erfarenhet av AI och avancerad analys. Hon är för närvarande nordisk chef för AI och analys på SAS Institute. Och just det här med ansvarsfull AI, det är verkligen din stora hjärtefråga, Josefin. Varmt välkommen.
Tack så mycket.
Så vi ska få höra på Navigating the Path to Trustworthy AI. Det låter ju oerhört spännande. Men först så var det ju en fråga från Johanna.
Precis.
In your opinion, what are the most important future skills to master human-centric AI? Och du kan välja att besvara den här med en gång eller om du vill väva in den som en del i din presentation.
Precis, och jag kanske lite båda och, tänker jag. Så jag säger då tack Mattias och tack Johanna. Thanks, Johanna. It's a very good question. I don't know if you're listening still. And since I got the question in English and also from an inclusivity standpoint, which is also important to me, I choose to speak English today so that everyone understands. I hope that's okay too. So future skills to master human-centric AI is that, and while I would not say it is a set of skills, but more a work that needs to be done. And I will come back to that in more detail in my presentation, like I said, but I believe every organization needs to start their trustworthy AI journey, their journey towards human-centric AI by sitting down with preferably a diverse group of people to bring as many perspectives in as possible and then agree on what is fair and what is trustworthy for them, for their organization, to ask themselves, what values and principles do we want to reflect in our employees, in the way we operate as well as in our technology. And for the latter, we need to bring this with us and work with this throughout the AI lifecycle, from the initial questions that we ask in the beginning, through the data management and through model development and deployment and in the governance work. And I will outline this a little bit more in detail during my session, so I'll come back to that. I guess I start by sharing my screen here, right? See if I can find that button. It should be
a big green button at the bottom.
Yeah, I think it's this one. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, perfect.
Good. Okay. So Matthias mentioned my name is Josefin Rosén. See if I can just get this down there. And you can connect with me with this fancy QR code here if you'd like. I actually work as trustworthy AI specialist for the software company SAS Institute, based in Stockholm, but in our R&D department in something called the Global Data Ethics Practice. And I transitioned into this role very recently, actually, so earlier this fall. And before this, I have been, just like Matthias said, leading our Nordic AI team for many years. And that is, I believe, also what is says in the program. So this is brand new, but also something that I have been working with for a very long time. So that feels very good. I would like to talk to you a bit about trustworthy AI today, naturally, and responsible innovation. And in that context, share some insights in order to inspire and also give you some ideas on how we work with these topics internally at SAS, where I come from, as well as to give you some general advice on what is needed in order to develop trustworthy AI. And I actually still, after talking about AI for many years with hundreds of people and customer, I often get the question, what is AI? And these days, I mean, in the beginning, I used to, bring up this definition and talk about that there are so many definitions. And today, I think, we know that we can Google what is AI. And instead, I tend to answer with a question: what do we want AI to be? Because, as I'm sure you're all aware of, AI learns from the data we let it train on. So we are the ones that are teaching AI what it should be. It's up to us what AI is. And I mean, trustworthy AI is, of course, the same thing as AI, right? And if you ask me, all AI must be trustworthy AI. Trustworthy AI is AI that you can trust. It's AI that is human-centric. It's AI that is safe and ethical and fair. AI that does not harm people, and AI that reflects our values as a society. So, as you can imagine, trustworthy AI requires more than technology. It requires a comprehensive approach. We call it a socio-technical approach, including people, including processes and technology. And I'll come back a little later to what you actually need to have in place to succeed. Upon this, it's important that we always reflect and ask not just could we, but also should we? Because as you probably noticed, we can do almost everything with AI these days. But then should we really? The answer is definitely not always yes here. With great power comes great responsibility, right? We've heard that one many times. But still, it is a really, really good thought to keep in mind when you're working with AI. So when I present in Teams, it's usually like a green square around the screen, but you still see my screen, right?
Yeah, no worries.
Oh, good. So if you've been watching the news lately, or actually, maybe it's enough if you've only been outside lately, you probably noticed how people talk about AI and especially generative AI basically everywhere these days, and in media and on TV and when we go out. AI has definitely played an important role in our society for quite some time, but the increased focus that we see on AI and the increase in the speed of its development that we're witnessing these last months is nothing but explosive, I would say. One of the keynote presenters at an event that I was attending a few weeks ago, she said really nicely, she said, AI has in a few months gone from being the icing on the cake to becoming the actual flour. So, the essential key ingredient in the cake itself. And that is so true, I think, and I like that way of expressing it, because AI is definitely increasingly embedded basically everywhere these days. We hear all the time about incredible things that AI can help us do and fantastic possibilities that it has. But unfortunately, we also hear more and more often about worries and even reports related to potential inaccuracies and to potential biases related to AI. And I believe it's becoming clear to all of us at this point that while AI brings amazing promises, it also has the potential to erode trust in unimaginable ways. And that is, of course, a very serious matter, because the key to any sustainable AI application is trust. And right now, that is unfortunately lacking to a large extent in our society when it comes to AI innovations. I think way too many people are scared of AI today, and we are worried about the fast development that we're seeing right now, especially in generative AI space. And trust can obviously not be forced upon people, right? We all understand that. But what we can do is to consistently act and behave and innovate in trustworthy ways. And this is also, I would say, a smart thing to do business-wise. because it's definitely easier to maintain trust than it is to try to rebuild it and regain it after it's been damaged. Unfortunately, many institutions around the globe, like governments and media that we're seeing here, are right now struggling with the challenge of having to rebuild trust. And according to this Edelman Trust Barometer that we see here, it's a global study on public trust. Business is actually the only institution that is seen as both ethical and competent, which are the two crucial qualities for trust. So I would say that nations cannot afford to see businesses move to the untrustworthy side of the spectrum, which really makes the subject of responsible innovation that we're discussing here today more critical than ever. Now, to their credit, governments around the world definitely recognize this issue. And as a response to that, they're starting to introduce AI guidelines and voluntary code of conducts and commitments and even AI legislations, right? And this is a work that is ongoing basically all over the world as we speak. And what is closest and therefore probably also most interesting to us here in the Nordics is, of course, the EU AI Act that the EU Commission proposed back in 2021 in April. And it's expected to come into force at the latest March 2024. It's been a long journey. And this is a proposal for the first ever AI regulatory framework. So EU is really leading the way here, which is pretty cool, I think. I believe that legislation will set a framework that can foster trust. The goal of the EU AI Act is, after all, to ensure that AI is human-centric and trustworthy. It aims to promote trustworthy AI to make sure that citizens can trust and feel safe while using AI that we have in our society today. And I don't know if any other presenters, because I unfortunately couldn't join this morning, if you had anyone already presented what AI Act is, but just very, very quickly to get everyone on the same page without digging too deep into this. The AI Act is, a risk-based approach that divides AI into 4 risk categories. It is unacceptable, high, limited, and minimal risk. And the focus of the AI Act is a high risk category. That is a primary focus. And this includes AI that potentially could have a negative effect on the individual's human rights, on health, on economy, and security. So in other words, a lot of the applications that we see in society today would belong here, right? That could, for instance, it could be banks using AI for credit scoring. It could be AI that is used to decide who would get the best price, or in criminal justice, it could be to decide who gets the harshest sentence. It could be in a healthcare setting, it could be to decide who would get to see the doctor first. In an HR setting, it could be who would be, selected as a candidate for that super attractive job. And that they're high risk does not mean that they are forbidden, but there will be requirements both in terms of technical standards such as transparency and traceability, as well as quite extensive reporting and controls and audit requirements that must take place before the AI solution can be brought to the market to make sure that no one gets harmed. And it could potentially be very expensive if we do not follow the requirements. It would be up to 6% of global companies' global annual revenue, or 30 million euros, whichever is the highest figure. And if we're looking at the revenue for some companies that we know well here in the Nordics, we can tell that it could be indeed more than 30 million euro. For H&M, for instance, it would be based on the revenue a couple of years ago, a bit would be a bit more than $1 billion US. And it would be a little bit more than $2 billion US for Volvo. And these numbers are actually based, like I said, on revenue for 2021. So based on last year's number, I think it would even be over $3 billion US. And for Amazon, it would be based on these numbers in this graph, $28 billion US, which I think based on last year's numbers would be a little bit more than $30 billion US. So quite a lot of money. So that's one reason, I guess, if you don't find any other reasons, is one reason that is good to make sure that you're being trustworthy and responsible when you deploy AI. And when the AI Act then comes into force, which is the latest March 2024, like I said, organizations will have a 2-year implementation phase before they can get fined. In many countries around the globe, like for instance, US and Canada and Japan and some other countries as well, they have already introduced voluntary commitments related to responsible AI innovation. And in the EU, they're now discussing if they could, get the AI Act put into, a little faster than 2 years, with a similar approach, a so-called AI Pact, which I think is quite nice, because 2 years is a long time considering how fast, AI has developed in this last year or half year even. So an AI Pact, I really like that term, seems like a good idea to me. And it will be interesting to follow and see what happens with that going forward. SAS, where I work, is a global software company, and we do business around the world. So naturally, we also very carefully monitor the regulatory and strategic approaches to AI in countries around the globe. And one thing that we notice is that basically all countries and basically all regions are taking a comprehensive approach to this. And that includes, setting technical standards for private and public sectors, but also setting requirements for trustworthy and ethical use of AI, and also ways to evaluate, measure, and assess the AI systems. If you want to activate a trustworthy AI system, that can never be an afterthought. And that's why the comprehensive approach is really, really important here. Because, if we want to deploy a trustworthy AI system, it takes more than just laws and regulations. We need, like I mentioned in the beginning, as a response to Johanna's question, we need people, but we also need solid processes. And last but not least, of course, we need technology for this. And this is a work that has to start well before the first line of code is written, and it has to continue throughout the AI lifecycle, from the initial questions that we would ask in the beginning before we even start working, throughout the data management and exploration, and through model development phase and deployment, until the decision or actions that comes out on the other end of the life cycle before it all starts all over again, because it's always ongoing, right? And I believe also building trust becomes easier if we can try to stick to strong values based on essential principles. And like I said to Johanna in the beginning, agreeing on those values and setting those principles is a work in itself that I recommend that every organization do in the beginning of their trustworthy AI journey, if they have not done it already. At SAS, where I work, we do have 6 guiding principles. There are human centricity, transparency, it's accountability, inclusivity, privacy and security, as well as robustness. We have them all here on this slide. Human centricity is then for us to promote human well-being, human agency, and equity. Transparency is to openly communicate intended use, risk, and how decisions are made. Accountability is to proactively identify and mitigate adverse impacts. Inclusivity is to make sure that we have accessibility and include diverse perspectives and experiences. Privacy and security is to protect the use and application of each individual's data. And finally, robustness is to make sure that we operate reliably and safely, and also, managing risks throughout the AI life cycle. And these principles work as our sort of North Star, where we always have humans at the center. And we've been putting a lot of effort into making sure that these principles and our values are reflected in our people and in those are our employees, right? And in the way we operate, so in our processes, as well as in our software platform, which is our technology. And we're using sort of a governance model to support these principles. And this governance model actually reflect this comprehensive approach that I mentioned with all aspects of people and processes and technology. So it includes oversight, where we have a committee. It's an interdisciplinary executive committee that gives us guidance on all matters of AI ethical dilemmas. That could be anything from procurement, what kind of technology we're going to procure, to how we end up selling and whether we would actually sell certain capabilities on the market. There is also controls, which is a group of people that are focusing on evaluating all the different AI compliance requirements that are being introduced around the globe. And they're also working on establishing AI-specific risk management methods for ourselves. There is also culture, which is super important, I believe, and something that we definitely cannot overlook. And here we are doing very intentional training and coaching of our colleagues around the globe in trustworthy AI principles and methods of trustworthy AI, as well as tools that are associated with trustworthy AI, because we believe that it's important to have a strong cultural sort of fluency in the organization around this topic. And then last but not least, of course, platform, which for us, for a software company, right? So this is our AI platform, SAS, which means that we're approaching trustworthy AI not only as a moral imperative, which could be one reason, right? And not only as a matter of compliance, which could also be another one, but also as a market, because we recognize in business, if you treat something as a market, then things get done, right? And this is a market where we can do well financially, which is important. And we can also at the same time do good for those that we serve. So by sort of being ethical by design and building trustworthiness into the platform throughout the AI life cycle, making it, like I said, the flower of our cake, basically, we can then make sure that people can use a platform to build responsible, trustworthy, and compliant AI. And we have divided this trustworthy AI market into 4 activation categories, those that I mentioned, and also 6 technology categories. And within each category, you can see that there are a number of core capabilities that we have identified as necessary at this moment in time. This is something that we, of course, come back to at least on a quarterly basis, because the market and landscape is moving so incredibly quickly right now. So basically, this is our view of what it takes to deploy trustworthy AI. This is not at all SAS specific, but more the capabilities, regardless of software vendor or open source or whatever you're using, that is needed to develop trustworthy AI. And I would like to just show you a few examples of what these could mean throughout the AI lifecycle. And if we start here in the data management part of the AI lifecycle, we know that good data is the foundation to trustworthy AI. Well, it's the foundation to any AI and any analytics, right? So here we need to make sure that the quality of the data is good. We have all heard of garbage in, garbage out, especially in this association, I think. And that is essentially what we're looking at here. We need to explore the data to make sure, for instance, that it's representative of those that we see as users of the AI that we're developing. And if we're training, the model on data only related to, for instance, white middle-aged men, which is still pretty common actually. The model will work best for white middle-aged men, which is okay if that was our intention. But if we were meant to have, a broader user group or a totally different user group even, then that needs to be reflected in the data. Then for both regulatory and ethical reasons, we also need to be able to detect private and sensitive information in our data in an efficient way. And then also to mask and hide or suppress those values or even columns or variables in an efficient way. And finally, in this stage, we need to keep track, where the data comes from and how it is used throughout the enterprise. So basically, in this part of the life cycle, we outline and we govern data in ways that protect both the people and the organization. If we then move into model development, which is the middle circle here of the AI life cycle, then it is all about transparency. It is throughout the AI life cycle, but especially here, in order to trust something and to judge whether it's fair or not, we need to be able to understand how the model arrived at the prediction that led to the decision or the action, at least to some extent, of course, depending on what application we're looking at. For instance, why did I get a lower credit than you did, for instance? And today there are a lot of different tools available to help us interpret even the most black boxish models. And I have selected 4 of those here, but there are many more. The first one here up to the upper left is a partial dependence plot that tells you how the prediction in general, on a global level, like for all predictions, how the prediction changes as we change one selected variable. And here we can see for this variable that we have selected here, it, as we increase that one, the output increases as well. And then to the upper right, we have the ICE plot with individual conditional expectation plot, and it does the same, but locally for one predicted value or one predicted observation at a time. And then to the lower right, we have LIME, which is local interpretable model agnostic explanations. And it also explains one specific prediction, but it takes more variables into account and builds sort of like a local interpretable regression model inside the model. And then give you explanations in the same way as you would be able to understand, the output of a normal regression model, looking at the coefficients for the different variables. And the last one in the corner here down to the right is Shapley. It's also a local method that describes one single prediction at a time. And among these 4, this one is the most intensive one in terms of computation because it takes all variables into account at the same time. It comes from the world of gaming initially, and it tells you how much each player, which here is a feature or a variable, how much each player contributes to the outcome of the game, which is here the prediction. And here, all the values add up to the predicted value in the end. So we get to know the contribution from each and every one of the players or of the variables. Also, in this part of the life cycle, we hear a lot about bias, and we hear a lot about bias in AI overall, and it's well documented, and it's definitely a serious concern. What is a bit difficult with bias is that it's actually a natural part about being human, right? We're all biased, but some of our biases can be unconscious prejudices that could be discriminating in a negative way. So why is that relevant here? Well, AI learns from historical data. We all know that. So for instance, if we were to develop an AI for automated decision making, we would let the AI train on historical data from a previous manual process where human decision makers made similar decisions in a similar situation. And while it learns to make the decisions in a similar manner, it will also learn the biases of the human decision makers, right? And it's one thing if one person makes an unfair decision, but when we start to use this AI for automated decision making at scale, it can easily make thousands of decisions per minute, which means that it can potentially very quickly go very wrong if we don't pay attention to this, right? And I think that all of us have heard of many, classical examples, because there are unfortunately too many examples of where things didn't quite go as planned, where the AI-driven decisions actually, for instance, discriminated or did harm in some way. There's a whole database of examples. You can see the link here down to the right. You probably heard, read about classic examples like AI incidents where, for instance, in hiring, AI applications where men were more likely to be employed than women, even though the women were equally qualified or sometimes even more qualified. We have heard of legal applications where African Americans received, tougher sentences than white, despite same crime, or AI-based lending applications where women consistently not had their loans granted if they were single, unmarried mothers, and where women were offered lower credit than men despite having the same credit score, something that actually happened quite recently at least, with Apple Card. And then we have this another serious mistake that most of you also probably read about, and that clearly, I think, demonstrates how important it is to get legislation such as the AI Act in place. And that is a Dutch scandal where a discriminatory AI application wrongly accused thousands of families of fraud, and that actually even resulted in the whole Dutch government resigning, right? And the history behind that one was that the Dutch tax authorities had used an AI to create risk profiles to spot childcare benefit fraud. For instance, having a dual nationality was marked as a big risk indicator, and so was also having a low income. And this went on for so many years, so it was like tens of thousands of families, often with lower incomes or belonging to ethnic minorities, that were wrongly accused of fraud and told to pay back a lot of money. And they were pushed into poverty, some of them, because they had gotten this for a long time. It led to unemployment, bankruptcies, and even children being taken into foster care. So indeed, quite serious incidents that probably could have been avoided if we would have legislation in place at that point. So with this, I'm not saying that I don't think that we should use AI for decision making. Not at all, because that's something I definitely think that we should, right? But I would like to ask you something, and that is, would you like to extend the past, or would you rather contribute to creating a fairer future? And if I would guess or hope that you would choose the latter, then you would need to make sure that you have capabilities in your platform for bias detection and mitigation. And in this context, bias would mean that there are differences in model performance or predictions for different groups. So for instance, if a loan engine would favor a particular gender over another gender. So here you need tools to be able to identify this. Here, for instance, to the upper left, you can see that there are larger errors for this yellow group, right, on the performance side. And on the prediction side, there are some differences also. In this case, we're looking at race as an example only. And also for any bias that you identify, you would need to obviously also be able to do something about it. We call that bias mitigation. And it could be, for instance, using synthetic data generation, or it could be using various algorithms for this. And in SAS, we have an algorithm that is repeatedly adjusting the weights, and it builds like a new classification model that, while it at the same time, it's optimizing the trade-off between accuracy and fairness. So it gives some on the accuracy, so it's good enough still, but it also, wins some on the fairness. And when I spoke about this at another conference a couple of weeks ago, I got the question, how do you know that you're not introducing new bias here when you decide what's fair or not fair. And that is a good question. And I believe, here it is super important that you have done your homework, right? What do you consider fair? Because you set this threshold yourself, and what is fair is so different in different contexts, in between use cases, in between organizations, in between nations even. And like I said, the work needs to include a diverse group of people so that you bring different perspectives to the table, and thereby you can also shield from bias. So these are really important features that can make a real difference indeed in your trustworthy AI work. And finally, start to come towards the end of my presentation, if you wonder, when it's time to deploy the models, we need to make sure that the models continue to enable correct decisions also over time. Models, they are sort of, in a sense, a bit like milk. They tend to be less fresh over time. They do expire. A model starts to decay when it's not, and when it starts to decay, it starts to also make incorrect predictions and enable incorrect decisions. And that happens when it's not anymore aligned with the present. And we all know that the present is something that changes all the time. I believe for most of us that became pretty obvious during the pandemic, at least, when a lot of things changed overnight, and a lot of both models and data became irrelevant overnight. So here it's great if we can govern all models from one central repository, especially if we have many models in production. And we need to make sure that we have transparency and traceability throughout the AI lifecycle. So it's not enough to just have a model, that is good and fair at the time of deployment. We need to monitor the performance over time, and preferably we're able to set alerts and automatic retraining of the models when they start to decay, so that they stay relevant and enable correct decisions over time. And on top of this, we start to see more and more so-called model cards that are really useful in this part of the AI life cycle. And this is sort of something that makes this part of the AI life cycle sort of accessible to everyone. You can think of it as a nutrition label for your food, but this is for AI instead. So they give both technical and non-technical users a comprehensive understanding of all the AI models that are deployed in their organizations. So a model card would preferably collect and surface important up-to-date information around, of course, the purpose of the model, what it was intended to be used for. So that is clear, but also important metrics, for instance, accuracy and fairness and data privacy and model drift, of course, so that anyone with just a quick look can be able to judge whether or not we are on the right path with our models. So to summarize a little bit here, there is a lot of conversation about and around responsible AI right now. But what I would like you to remember is that responsible innovation is always performed by responsible innovators. So it is actually all of our responsibility to make sure that AI reflects the best of us, and that AI is not repeating the injustices of the past. And when we invest in AI, which is something that most companies are doing today to keep up with competition, we cannot just, behave like ostriches and put our heads in the sand. I love this picture. I usually finalize with this one. So we have a responsibility to make sure that it's safe and that it's ethical and that it's fair and that it can be trusted. If you would like to read some more on the topic, there are some, both demos and white papers and things like that in this QR code. I will also have it on the next, or on the final slide here. Thank you so much for listening to me. And I believe, Matthias, that we have time for some questions. Is that right?
Indeed, we do. So
Good.
feel free to type your questions in the chat box or just unmute yourself and ask away. We have two questions actually from Nancy Steinbach, our chairman. Um, you are here in the front line of this work. What competences are you combining to push forward at SAS Institute?
What competences? You mean what competences I'm recommending others to have, or
I believe
what
it's what competences are you using and combining to keep pushing the agenda at SAS Institute?
I think, like I said, it's sort of a comprehensive approach there too. I think it's, you need to have some skills when it comes to, analytics and advanced analytics and skills like you all have here, I guess, in this meeting. That is, important to be able to have someone that can lead the work, understanding what it is that is happening, because that's important. But at the same time, it's important in the work that we are able to include also people that are not maybe so knowledgeable when it comes to AI and analytics, because we're building the platform so that it could be used by other types of users as well. And that is important so that we can, bring in different types of perspectives also when we're developing the AI, even if you don't know so much about the actual technology behind it, that is also important. But if you have people around you that knows about, the setting where we intend to use AI, the business and the business where it's going to be applied, it's important that they have some interests into this to add their knowledge into the story as well. So it's important to have diversity in that sense as well. And then I think, it's for me, myself, it's advanced analytics, and it is, ways to communicate this in a way so that people understand and can know what they need to do when they come back to their organizations, kind of like I'm doing right now.
All right, excellent.
Mm.
And the second question from Nancy, what is your experience in the uptake of your models? Does it require additional support, or is there a particular area that is more in discussion?
Do you mean when we deploy the models, what is needed? Or
Nancy, would you like to jump in and clarify?
Yes, thank you, Josefin. Thank you for a very good speech, presentation. Yes, no, yeah, I was. That could be a good angle to the question. Yeah, let's go with that when you deploy them.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned a little bit here, when you start to use the model, it's important that you're not just, thinking that now it's all done and we have a fair model, we have a good model that predicts correctly. Now it's, now we're done and we can just, start to get the payoffs of our work, right? So we need to make sure that we always have governance, a solid governance framework. We need to monitor models over time and remember, that automation and autonomy is not the same thing. We will always need to have humans in the loop, that sort of, look and make sure that they continue to do as intended. For some use cases, that would mean that you would need to maybe, update your model every year or so, and that some models need to be continuously updated to be able to do well and create value and be fair also over time. So a solid governance framework, including both humans and machines, is always going to be important.
Right, excellent, thank you. So as you mentioned, and several others as well, there are a lot of initiatives right now with making sure that we build trustworthy and ethical AI, where EU is at the forefront. What would you say are the biggest problems or risks moving forward with all of these regulations?
With the regulations in themselves, you mean? I think, for me, I think regulation, like I said, will foster, trust and responsible use of AI, will sort of create, a framework for these things that I am talking about, that they become reality and something that all organizations are looking into. I know, though, that there are a lot of people out there that are afraid that regulation will kill innovation, right? That it will be too complicated to deploy AI, because there's so many things that you need to have in place and so many things that you need to tick off before you can put things on the market. They even hear, that some are afraid that Sweden, or not Sweden, but EU as a region will, fall after when it comes to competition. But first of all, I think, that we're regulating AI doesn't mean that it's not AI being forbidden. It's just that we are trying to make sure that what comes out actually is good, and we're sort of forcing trust and transparency into the business models. And even though this is in the EU, it will also be so that other countries have to apply to our legislations as well when they want to position something on our market. So this goes for everyone. And I think as long as we have a solid governance framework, and build this in, work with this throughout their lives, like kind of, when we start to ask the questions in the beginning, what is fair for us? What is it that we want to reflected with our AI? We have control during the exploration and data management phase. We know how to interpret and mitigate and identify bias. We are monitoring our models over time. If we can make sure that we get that as part of the process, something that happens throughout the process, I don't think that it will be a delay when it comes to deployment. But if we don't have that in place, and instead, try to do all of these things afterwards, once we have, developed the model and want to put it in production, then we go back and see if there is any bias, and then we go back and see if how we can explain, a complex model afterwards. Then it's going to be difficult, because it is difficult to do things afterwards. It's way too complicated, and it takes way too long time. And while we're working on that, the models are getting old. It's like leaving the milk out of the fridge. So it will expire, and it will be like a bottleneck sort of administration. But make sure that you make it part of the process, basically making trustworthiness part of your cake, right? Not the icing.
Another question from Jens Malmros. Do you see any differences for trustworthy AI between businesses and government use?
Yeah, I mean, I guess many times when it comes to government use, it could be also, of course, in business, but it's often something that affects an individual person. It comes close to the citizens, right? So especially now when we're discussing the EU AI Act, there are more worries around, what this will mean to them than for many other business applications. We're dealing with decisions that can affect people's economy and security and things like that. So I think in terms of these discussions, they are more intense in government organizations, and they have greater potential to affect an individual more serious, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and thank you very much for your presentation. It was very insightful and interesting.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to be Karim Jabari. I noticed that Karim is with us, so if you would like to ask your question for Karim before we go on a little break.
Yeah, right. So my question to you, Karim, if you're listening, otherwise Matthias can repeat afterwards. This summer, Max Tegmark, we all know Max Tegmark, he had a widely discussed radio talk, a so-called sommarprat in P1 in Swedish radio, where he played Highway to Hell, and he talked about AI being the cause of Earth's downfall in the relatively near future. And that scared a lot of my friends and relatives, I think. And I assume that you, just like me, have been asked by many in your circle of friends, what is your response to Max's concerns? Is he right? So I'm asking you, what is your comment? Should we be afraid that superintelligence will take over the world in the near future? I'm looking forward to hear your answer very much. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Josefin. Karim, we'll have to wait for your answer until after the break, but it's great to see that you're with us. Vi växlar tillbaka till svenska. Tack så jättemycket, Josefin. Otroligt spännande att lyssna till vad du hade att berätta och det arbete som ni gör för att skapa trustworthy AI.